Viewers, welcome to Radio Metro Mail. You are watching Catch Up. You know, in Catch Up, we invite people, those who have interest in politics or those who are engaged in politics, active politics. Today we have a very special guest with us, Honourable Minister Bill Blair. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I am honoured to have the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Let's get started.
Of course.
But before that, how are you doing?
Everything's beautiful, a beautiful summer day.
Yeah.
I hope all of your listeners and all of my constituents are enjoying this beautiful summer.
Thank you very much. So, Prime Minister Trudeau, he included you, or he invited you to the cabinet with an expectation that you will bring a new dimension or different kind of leadership. Do you think that you have made that expectation?
Well, I certainly hope so. I brought, when I first went to Ottawa, I did it at the culmination and the conclusion of nearly a 40-year police career, including 10 years as the Chief of Police in Toronto. And so the Prime Minister has given me a number of jobs over the past 4 years, asking that I would get some things done, important and sometimes difficult and complex things. And when he gave me my ministerial role and invited me to join the cabinet, he's given me a number of, I think, very important tasks based on my experience and some areas of expertise that I can contribute to make Canada a safer and better place.
So as a Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction, so you are putting all your efforts and you are, assisting government to reduce the gun violence.
Yes.
So what have you done so far with regard to the gun violence?
Actually, we've done a number of very important things, although the work continues because it is so important. I don't think there is any greater responsibility for any order of government than the safety of their citizens. And we know Canadians are quite understandably concerned about violence that takes place in their communities. We know that much of that gun violence is a direct result of gang activity. And so one of the things that we have undertaken is to make significant new investments, $345 million, into policing and law enforcement to ensure that our police services have the capacity, the resources that they need, the training and the tools that they need in order to deal effectively with gun and gang violence. In addition, because of my responsibility at the border, we know that many of the guns that are used for criminal offenses in Canada are smuggled from the United States. And so we have made very significant investments in increasing the capacity of the Canadian Border Security Agency to detect those firearms being smuggled across their border, but also investments in policing the RCMP to ensure that we investigate those criminal organizations responsible for the importation of those guns. There are also some very significant steps that we have been taking to make it more difficult for people to acquire firearms legally and then use them for criminal purposes in this country through new legislation. And so we're continuing that work. The Prime Minister has asked me to make a number of other recommendations and analysis of other additional measures that we can and should take. And I have gone back to the Prime Minister with those recommendations, and God willing, if we are returned as government, I believe that there are some additional steps that we can and must take to keep Canadians safe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for last few years, statistics, definitely we are doing better this year compared to last 2-3 years. But again, we are doing not that much better compared to 2015 statistics. But my question is, you said that trying to address that issue through building the capacity of the border security. Do you think that only the security agencies or the police can handle it, or do you think that the community engagement is also important?
Let me tell you, as you, I'm sure your listeners are aware, I was for very many years the police chief in Toronto.
Yeah.
I know that law enforcement has an important role to play, but if we only enforce the law, if we only make arrests, we will not keep our communities safe. And so when I was the police chief, we undertook a number of very significant measures to reduce gun violence, and it was very successful. Between 2005 and 2015, we saw a very significant reduction in gun violence in Toronto, almost 45%. And unfortunately, since 2015, we've begun to see those numbers once again rise. And so, although I've mentioned already the additional investments we are making in policing and in the border security, it's also important to make investments in community, in our kids, to make sure that they have better choices, that they don't get involved in criminal activity, that they have job opportunities, they have educational opportunities, that we invest in housing, in support services, that we invest in making communities stronger and safer places. And that's not just policing, of course. That means that every young person should have better choices, better access to services. And by strengthening communities, I think that is the real secret to keeping our communities safe. Unfortunately, we also know that there will be some people who will commit violent crimes, and then it is the responsibility of the police to take care of them. But we have to, and our government is very committed to working within communities to make the differences so that young people will not choose to get a gun and involve themselves in gang activity. They'll make better choices and be better citizens.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. So there's another thing that many Canadians they believe that particularly the irregular migration has reached to a crisis point. What is your take on this?
Well, when the Prime Minister asked me to take on responsibility for that, what we were seeing is there was a significant number of people that were crossing from the United States into Canada, seeking asylum and crossing our borders irregularly. And so the Prime Minister asked me to manage that situation better.
That's right, yeah.
And so we have taken some very significant steps, and we have been reduced by more than 50% the number of people that were crossing our borders irregularly. We've seen a very significant reduction. And the reason that reduction has happened is because we are very aggressively managing those flows. We are improving the amount of time it takes for determination. If a person truly is in need of our protection, they will receive it. But unfortunately, a number of people have been crossing our borders in an irregular fashion who are not true refugees, but rather just economic migrants. And so quickly determining whether or not they are eligible for refugee status is an important part of our strategy. We've also been working very closely. I've been a number of times to the United States, working closely with the Americans, because the Americans can take and have taken some very important steps to reduce the number of people that are coming into the United States for the purpose of coming to Canada to seek refugee status. And so we've been working with them to improve the issuance of their tourist visas, for example, from a number of countries where these people were coming. And I have been also working and negotiating with the American government on the treaty that exists between our countries, the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Yeah, that's right.
In order to more effectively manage those individuals. But I can tell your viewers, I think Canadians expect us to manage the system properly.
Yes.
It is not an issue of safety and security. The RCMP and CBSA are making sure that no one comes into this country who represents a threat of criminality or security. But it is an issue of fairness. And Canadians expect us to manage a system that is fair, where the rules are upheld and enforced appropriately, and that no one is given an advantage or disadvantage as a result. And so that's been my job, is to make sure that those rules are being properly enforced, that the fairness of our system is maintained. If someone really needs our protection, they'll receive it. But if they do not, we'll determine that quickly, and then they'll be removed from the country.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I think you have raised two important things. One is the public safety, that you are not compromising with the public safety.
Never.
And again, the rights of the asylum seekers. So these two issues, how you like to strike the balance between these two things when you are talking about policy or forming a law or policy issues?
I think we should always ensure that we will never put someone at risk. And so if someone comes to Canada who is seeking our protection, if they are truly at risk, we will protect them. But we also know that not everyone who comes to the country, and particularly those crossing the border irregularly, are in need of our protection. We need to make sure that that system works very efficiently to determine whether or not they are eligible for asylum, and when it is not, that they should be subject to a timely removal. The system should be fast, it should be fair, and it should be final. And my job is to work with all of the government agencies to make sure that Canadians can be assured that our system is in fact fair, that the rule of law is being upheld, that we are not going to put people at risk, but at the same time, we are not going to allow people to use the system inappropriately.
Manageable. So do you think that the recent influx of refugee could be an issue in upcoming election?
Well, I know that I've traveled across the country and spoken to a number of people who were concerned about the irregular migration of refugees. But I've been able to reassure them that our government has taken very effective steps to reduce the number of people that were crossing our border irregularly. We know, though, that there are people who are fleeing war and persecution from many places in the world Canada is a highly desirable, safe country for people to seek refuge. And so people will come to this country, but when they come seeking our protection, we Canadians need to be assured that the system is well managed, that the law
and they are secured as well,
and that's right, that their safety and security will
Yes.
never be compromised.
Yeah.
And I have been responsible for the safety of people of my city for nearly 40 years,
Yeah.
and I would never compromise their safety. We will always maintain that. But at the same time, Canada is also a country of compassion and fairness. And as long as our laws are being upheld, as long as the rules are being enforced in a fair way, I think Canadians can be reassured. I also recognize that this is a country that has been built on the incredible strength and contribution of immigrants and refugees, people who fled war and persecution and sought refuge in Canada, and they have helped build this country. And so we will always be a place that is welcoming to people who are seeking our protection, but at the same time, for those who come seeking our protection, they have to know that the rules will be upheld, and that if it is determined that they need protection, they'll receive it, and if it's determined that they are not, they are going to be removed.
Okay, so you mentioned about the Safe Third Country Agreement. So many people say that the Safe Third Country Agreement is no longer working the way we intended. So what are the initiative or steps you have taken?
Well, first of all, let me assure you that the Safe Third Country does work very well.
Yeah.
At the majority, the large majority of people who come to Canada seeking refuge don't cross irregularly. They cross at a regular point of entry. They make their claim inland in Etobicoke.
That's supposed to be.
And by the way, 99%
Yeah.
of the refugees who make a claim in Ontario have not crossed irregularly. They've come at a regular point of entry. And so in those circumstances, in all of those circumstances, the Safe Third Country applies and works very well. But unfortunately, we have a set of circumstances, particularly in the province of Quebec, where people have crossed irregularly to avoid the terms and conditions of the Safe Third Country. And so I've gone to the Americans and said, we believe that this agreement needs to be updated, modernized, to cover this eventuality, and that it can be improved to the mutual benefit of both countries. But Canada cannot simply act unilaterally for what is essentially a bilateral treaty between our two countries. And so it is necessary to work with the Americans and to negotiate improvements to that agreement. But that's not the only step that we can take. We've also gone to those communities in the United States, or even around the world, people coming through the United States to come to Canada, to explain that crossing the border irregularly is not a ticket to citizenship, and there are real consequences and disadvantages to crossing in that way, and so by upholding those laws, we are discouraging people from crossing irregularly and encouraging those who need our protection to enter the country the right way.
Thank you very, very much, Honourable Minister. So most of our Radio Metro Mail's viewers, those who live in Canada, they reside in your riding.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, that's a source of great pride for me.
Yes. So do you think that you are quite well engaged with the Bangladeshi Canadians, those who are, most of them are our listener or viewers?
I've been very, very grateful for the wonderful support that I have received from the Bengali community here in Scarborough Southwest.
Yeah.
I agree, I have one of the largest Bengali populations of any part of Canada here in my riding. And it is a community that I have had many opportunities to engage with at their various community events, at festivals, at cultural events, and even at their places of worship. And so it's a relationship I value. When I first decided to run in Scarborough Southwest, I met many people in the Bengali community who said that they needed help, they needed services, and they wanted those services to be available to them in their language, served by people who also were competent in the cultures. And so the very first two people I hired were people from the Bengali community, so that any Bengali who came to my constituency office in need of help could receive services in their language and from people who understood their culture and the challenges of being, establishing yourself as a new immigrant group within Canada. But when I was named minister, I was at an event, and one of my Bengali friends stood up and said that I was the first Bengali minister in the government of Canada. And that is a source of great pride for me, because I feel that I have been welcomed and made a member of the Bengali community in Scarborough.
Okay.
And so that's one of the great privileges of representing this community.
Have you learned any Bengali words or something?
Not bad.
Dhanwad, yeah.
And by the way, one of the things that the Bengali community has taught me is the importance of mother language. The Mother Language Day, and the sacrifice of many Bengalis in support of their mother language. It's something that in a country as diverse as Canada, it helps those of us who were born in Canada to understand the importance of language and culture.
Definitely.
And so it's one of the lessons that the Bengali community has taught me, the importance of language.
Dhanyavad. Thank you very much. I think the last question I'd like to ask you about that, it is about your riding again, because there is an organization called PACE, Progressive Action for Community Empowerment. We are involved with that. And we did that, one survey before the last federal election. With regard to the civic engagement of the Bangladeshi Canadians, those who live in this riding. And the survey found that 62% people, they think that they are not politically engaged in the political process. And 13% people, Bangladeshi Canadian, they did not vote for last 10 years. So it seems that we need to, engage them more in the political process or in the civic engagement system.
Yes.
So what should we do, or what can we do in this regard?
Well, certainly, I always encourage. I think every Canadian should vote.
Definitely.
And I have been very blessed in this riding. I know that survey, but I will tell you that for me, when I was seeking the nomination to run for the Liberal Party in Scarborough Southwest, a very substantial majority of the people that came out and supported that nomination were people from the Bengali community. During the election process, they were my staunchest and most reliable supporters. And since then, and by the way, for my colleague Nathaniel Orson Smith, just across Victoria Park, it's also a very important community for him as well. And so what we have seen is a great deal of increase in civic engagement and political engagement. But I think that we were only beginning in that process. We've seen, for example, our provincial representative, Dolly Begum, who is
first
Bangladeshi woman in a provincial legislature. That's a very significant step forward. I think the community will continue to engage. I will tell you from my experience. In my limited experience in politics, because I'm only been involved politically for the last 4 years, but I would tell you that certainly in Scarborough Southwest, the Bengali community is overwhelmingly the most politically engaged community of all of my neighborhoods and all of my communities in Scarborough.
Okay, thank you very much. So, do you have any specific message to our viewers and listeners? Most of them, they live in your riding, that's what I'm saying.
I would just like to take the opportunity to express my very sincere gratitude for the friendship and the support that I have received from so many people in the Bangladeshi community. We have seen a transformation of this part of the city as a direct result of the cultural enrichment that the Bangladeshi community has brought to it. And I think Scarborough is changing very much for the better. And as the Bengali community continues to move across from Crescent Town into Scarborough, we've seen businesses opening up, people becoming far more engaged in community. It's improving the neighborhood. It makes it very exciting and very vibrant, and so I would just simply express my gratitude to my very many friends in the Bangladeshi community, and I want to also assure them of my absolute commitment to continue to support them and to work hard for them every day. I think it is a source of great pride and friendship for me. I am very hopeful that I will have the opportunity to continue to serve, and I would simply ask my very many friends and supporters in the Bangladeshi community for your support, to give me an opportunity in the fall to continue to represent this community to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Viewers, we were speaking with the Honourable Minister Bill Blair, Thank you very much for watching our program. So we'll see you again in our next program with a new guest. Until then, take care and stay well.